Welcome to the preview podcast for the EdLeadS Leadership Summit 2021. I'm Simon Evans and I'm here with Mike Phelan, Assistant Manager of Manchester United, and academic Dave Horrocks. And we're going to be looking into some of the issues you'll be able to cover on this Leadership Summit. So let's start off, Dave. Perhaps you can give us a broad overview, really, of the issues we're going to be looking at here.
Yeah, we're looking at growth mindset primarily, which is a key topic of the Leadership Summit. And we're looking at how students and people that engage in this program can utilise that in terms of their own personal development, how they can grow within the particular course that they're on at the university, within the topic that they're studying, and how they can actually become the best they can possibly be to be able to have a successful career, successful life in whichever endeavour it is they've actually chosen to go forward with.
When we look at personal development and people gaining the skills for a successful career, this phrase growth mindset always gets mentioned. We presume that people already have the work ethic, the attitude, or else they wouldn't even be looking at these issues. But Mick, what is the growth mindset, and how have you seen that philosophy, if you like, that approach to life work in football in your business?
Growth mindset to me is about being very open-minded. You know, we can often read a lot, we can watch a lot of things, we can present a lot of things, but it's really finding a way through the whole catalogue of emotions in order to find what suits you. How do you see things? You know, I'm a firm believer in there aren't right ways and wrong ways. There's just a way, and it's a way that you find yourself. So you follow a path. Some people are good at reading, some people are good at writing, some people are excellent at watching, and we find that in football. You know, what's really interesting from a player's point of view and a coach's point of view is that interaction between the departments, really, as to how we perceive improvement. How do we see it? How do we improve? And we're all different. We all learn in different ways, and I think it's really important to find your way. Yeah, listening is important, but seeing is important, and doing is important. Doing, and what I mean by doing, growth mindset lends itself to doing things that often fail. You know, it's not always the correct things that happen. It doesn't go according to the plan you want, but it's about manipulating that plan along the way and finding a way through the mire, really. There's a lot of things going on there, and players have to analyse themselves, coaches analyse themselves, and growth mindset is really about what is it that makes you tick, what makes you work through situations which aren't pre-planned. There are obstacles along the way, and I think a growth mindset through education gives you the opportunity to find yourself.
I think one of the interesting things about when we talk about footballers and how they come into a system as young people, and you know, the phrase development is used a lot, and there's a sort of assumption for those of us on the outside that somebody comes into this factory, as it were, at the start, and there's a gradual natural improvement and they become a professional footballer at the end. Clearly there's a reason why some people get to the end as top international footballers, and a large majority of the people who go into the system don't.
Yeah, I think there's an element of identification. You're going into education. Football's an education. I see it as a career. I think it's changed over the years, you know, because of other circumstances. But I always saw it as a long-term career. That's both playing and coaching. And I think education's the same. You know, you don't get instant results. Education allows you to have huge ideas. We all have a way of wanting to be the best we possibly can, but there's a career path through that, and education provides that career path for you to find a way through it. It's the same with footballers. We look at the player, we look at the person, we look at the individual, and we look at the surroundings. You know, the environment that they come from is really important, and then we try to process all that information and then feed that back to them, and hopefully they respond to that and they grow. You know, and that is not just growth mindset, that's just growth as a person as well. And I think that's really important along that journey. Time is important as well. give yourself the time to be able to make those building blocks, you know, to build the house that you want. It's pretty straightforward. But it's all about learning, picking yourself up again through failure, going again, finding a way through it, and at the end of it, being satisfied with what you've produced.
One of the phrases that often gets mentioned in this area, people talk about getting out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Dave, perhaps, I mean, how does making yourself uncomfortable, how does that help somebody develop?
From an academic perspective, you would actually say that learning takes place when you're uncomfortable. It is difficult. If you're under pressure or you're faced with something that you've not normally done or something that you're doing for the first time, then you have to think. And it's quite, you get a different mental feeling and a different physiological feeling. It is difficult, but that is where the body and the brain is processing things, thinking, right, how do I solve this? How do I actually get to the top of this particular problem or issue that I've got here? And at the time, it's quite difficult, but then you come out of it and you reflect back. It may be an hour later, it may be the day after, and you sort of think, was I as good as I really could have been there? Did that go to plan? And that's the right way to think. That actually is a growth mindset, which is looking back on an uncomfortable situation. And then the answers that reflection gives you is, right, points 1, 2 and 3, I actually did those quite well. Oh, I was a little bit weak there on number 4. It's what you do when you go away and sort of think, what could I have done to make number 4 better? So you've then actually got 1, 2, 3 and 4. So you've got a more complete jigsaw. And this could be hundreds of pieces in, you know, a very challenging, serious job, such as, let's say, a pilot in the forces or a surgeon or an elite footballer. Millions and millions of things, but you're constantly outside your comfort zone to get further, but reflecting back on that to understand why and how, and then applying yourself again in a different manner to try to be able to solve that. And when you've applied yourself in a different manner and perhaps pushed on a little bit further, you've developed. Then you go back and you do it again, and it's just a repeated cycle of change. It's not the same day after day. You're reacting to that pressure, but in a logical manner.
So part of that process is reviewing then, isn't it? It's looking back. That what you're talking about there is looking back. I mean, as a football coach, that's quite a big part of your job, isn't it? Having a look back at what happened last week and how do we do it better next week.
I think you tend to look back in the moments you have the time to look back. You know, in football and the fast pace of the football and football as a game now, you tend to look forward more than back now. Back gives you experience, forward gives you the future, you know, and I think that's really important. And what I can stress is it's chaotic at times. You know, it's not smooth running. It can be chaotic, and everything in your head, you're absorbing lots of things about your environment, about the people around you, and you want to please and you want to do good, but it is chaotic, and it's having sometimes that approach of calmness when you are on your own, you are unaffected by what's going on outside, and you can then start to bring those pieces together, which makes that pathway a little bit easier. And we tend to do that with players individually and collectively. You know, it's a team sport, and we have to find a way of making sure all those examples, all those analysis projects we do, all the talk that we do comes to a point where everybody benefits because of the team sport. And that is difficult at times, and it's not smooth. It's a wonky road, you know. It isn't a straight A to B. There's a lot of things going on there, and you need plenty of people around you to be able to put that into practice. But you also need the player to be open-minded to the fact that you aren't the finished product, and in a student's case, you aren't the finished article. You will get there, but there are ways and means of treading that path in order to make you who you're going to be. It's not, you know, it's the start is education, and it takes you a long way if you absorb all the information you can.
And one way of people leaving their comfort zone that that forces them into these situations really is when they move into a completely different environment, and there's no bigger difference of environment than moving which part in the world you live in. I've done it myself 3 or 4 times working in different countries, and I know that it does really focus your mind on how do I deliver my best in a completely different situation with completely different people and expectations and so on. Again, in football, it's a really good area of crossover with business, I think, where you see every year there are people coming from all over the world to England, and it's happening in other countries as well, where they're coming from different cultures, different languages, different expectations, different methods of working, and are expected to very quickly get up to speed. That must be a fascinating process.
Yeah, well, we have transient players in the game, but we have players that come from one country to another. We have players like Cristiano Ronaldo, who left a small island of Madeira to go to Portugal, then into England and on to Spain, then he's gone into Italy. I mean, his education has become unreal, really, you know, but his plan has worked. He's become one of the world's best footballers.
Did he have a plan for that, you think? You felt?
I think probably the player had a plan for that, because, you know, when you start out with the mindset of I want to be the best in the world, you know, it's unusual if you're going to do that in one country. You may have to spend time outside your country, learn a different culture, understand yourself a little bit more, live in a different environment, but also try to become the best in the world. You know, we've other players that have come, you know, like Cavani now, who's recently come. You know, he's an experienced guy, but he's took it upon himself to come out of his secure environment into an unpredictable one in the Premier League, but he's taking it on board. So that's further education for him before he probably decides to call time on his career. You know, there are plenty of examples. Even your local boys have been very successful. Manchester-based boys have come, you know, from just living at home to living outside of the home. Suddenly their growth has been maturity within an environment of football, but also then finding a way of living on their own, or, you know, becoming a family outside, but staying in the same area. But there's been big changes there, big decisions to be made, and I think that's really important in the growth mindset of anybody, is to take on these challenges, find those answers by travelling, certainly by experiencing things, different things, not necessarily in your own sphere of education. Look outside of that a little bit. Football in particular gives you that opportunity. You can look at other sports and you can relate it back to football. You can take things out of other sports in order to give to football players a different viewpoint. But also it's experiences for them, because, you know, we don't live in a unique environment. Sport is sport. You know, we all have to have different challenges, both individual challenges and team challenges.
It's interesting in the business world as well, Dave, when I work for Reuters news agency, which is one of the biggest news agencies in the world, and we have, as a multinational company, you're coming across people who are heads of department, senior positions in a company, who come from vastly different backgrounds from all over the world. You have no idea when you send an email what that person's story is or where they're coming from. You eventually meet them and you find out they've had very interesting journeys. A course like this for people who are looking to have successful careers in global business, what kind of skills does this open people up to for that journey?
I think you've got to have the bravery, alluding to what Mick has just discussed there, of whatever you do in whatever subject it may be or what position you're in, to actually open yourself up, and open yourself up in terms of learning from your peers and your seniors, and perhaps reading wider in the industry that you're actually going into, but also open yourself up in terms of actually making some decisions and doing a few things. And that might be taking a gamble, but it's actually a calculated gamble. There's some evidence or there's some knowledge behind it. I will write this particular article because I've got a viewpoint on this particular way of working in that industry. Do it. Get it out there. Some people might criticise that, but that's part of life. You get that in football, you get that in academia, and you'll get that in business. But going back to what we said earlier, you'll then learn from that. You then make another decision, and what you do next time will be better. So we're sort of in a world these days, especially with social media, everyone's quite literally the CEO of themselves. People are a brand now, people are a company, and you've got to sort of treat yourself like that, be professional, but make some decisions. Don't just sort of sit there and soak everything up. Think I'll learn X, Y, and Z, I'll get a good qualification, I'll get a good grade, and then life will happen for me. Life will happen if you actually make it happen. And I think that's where you've got to be brave, but be wise in terms of being brave. Make these decisions from an evidence base and from research, but do them. Write something, volunteer for something, go and challenge someone. Mike will be speaking in the EdLeadS EduCity conference early in 2021. Ask him some questions. You're dealing with a guy who's been to the top here, coached a Champions League winning team, won plenty of Premier Leagues, coached some of the best footballers in the world. How did he do it? Why did he do it? What did he get wrong? It's quite possible that mistakes have been made along the way. And when he did he learn from that? Did he develop? Did he go any further? But this is a great opportunity to speak with a world leader to a degree and find out how and why, but be brave and ask those questions.
Yeah, and there's so many components within the growth mindset, aren't there? And I know on the course you're going to be looking at, and at the summit you're going to be looking at issues such as leadership, communication, decision making. These are all interconnected in a lot of ways. But I mean, in terms of leadership, you've been there with Sir Alex Ferguson at Manchester United. You've seen how his leadership operated. You've worked with other managers as well. What for you have been the key elements that you've seen there in terms of successful leadership?
Leadership is about bringing people along on that journey that you want to succeed in, and I think that's really important to be around a culture which accepts that, enhances that, and pushes that. And I think in the day with Sir Alex, he gave you the opportunity to develop yourself, but develop the work that you were doing on behalf of the football club, and also develop him, challenge him. You know, I think that's vitally important. Leaders still need challenging. They don't necessarily sit at the top of that tree and direct the traffic. They need inspiration sometimes. They need sometimes those conversations whereby you can see things but they can't, and you just prompt them into areas which they haven't really given much thought to. At the end of the day, the leader probably makes the major decision. But along that journey that the leader goes on and through the people that he works with, he formulates that decision-making process to get to that point where, yes, there are calculated decisions as a leader, but there are also non-calculated decisions. They're spur-of-the-moment decisions. But like Dave says, they are decisions. And with a good team around that leadership, I think then you can push those qualities to the fore and you can become an excellent team.
Yeah, and communication is always talked about in this context, Dave. I mean, it's essential, isn't it, to any if you talk about leadership and decision making, how you present yourself and how you put your ideas across and listen.
I think you're right in terms of present yourself, the word that you use there. Communication, it's not just speaking to someone. We all have social media profiles these days. You have a CV. It's the way that you may even be dressed to walk into an environment. Once of a day it was business or professional dress. Now it's sort of be prepared for that environment that you're going into and look like you're about to deliver within that cultural context and the demands of that particular role. So you're communicating with your body language, you're communicating with the footprint that you leave behind you on social media, and you're communicating with the way you present yourself when you're actually doing the job and the role. So look at communication as quite a multifaceted aspect, really. It's something that is always there, it's omnipresent, it's live. We're communicating now here, and we're communicating the minute that we walk out this door and the general public see us and we go into a shop or wherever it may be. It's something that's always around you. So the better you are at that, the more successful you will be as you go forward. I
mean, it's fundamental to your job, isn't it? I mean, that's what it's all about, really.
Over the years, it's become probably one of the most important things, you know, within an organisation. certainly a multi-functional organisation, and there's more and more departments now that you are working with. Communication is vital in order to make sure it runs as smoothly and as effectively as you can. And Dave's correct in communication is a multitude of things. You know, it's a topic on its own, but it is a serious topic now. You know, we don't necessarily now communicate by talking to each other. We do it by email. We do it by, you know, all the other media circles out there. We can find a way. We can become individual but collective at the same time. Sometimes we don't know who we're talking to. It's just out there, and we can find information and gather information through communication around the world. There's information out there all the time, and it's happening now. It's not that you have to wait. It's there 24/7, and it's a valuable tool. But communication in an organisation is huge.
There's so much as we could talk about here, and obviously a lot of this detail you will be getting into during the summit and the course that's related to it. Let's just wrap up a little bit. Decision making is part of it. Communication, leadership, it all comes together as part of that growth mindset. Dave, could you just sort of summarise, really in a nutshell, what people who engage with this program are going to get from it?
You're going to get a unique experience. Talking to someone such as Mike Phelan, who spent 20 plus years in various roles at Manchester United, one of the biggest football clubs in the world. He's been a player, he's been a coach, an assistant manager. He's worked with some of the young people that have come through, new signings from many different countries that have come in, and experienced players. And I think what this particular programme gives you is exposure to someone like that. And you've got to put yourself under a bit of pressure, as we said earlier. That's where learning takes place. There are 4 weeks, 4 particular Q&As and seminars with one of the greatest sports leaders out there in the world. Take advantage of it, because this is something that is not available to all these universities around the world. Take what you can from it personally, perhaps go in with an objective, right? How can I get better from this? Do a bit of research, find out where has he come from, what was his journey, how did he get from A to B, were there any difficulties along the way, what were the challenges, the teams that he's played in or worked with, did they lose? You know, something that springs to mind, they played Barcelona at Wembley in a Champions League against Lionel Messi and lost quite underwhelmingly 3-1 in that particular game. What happens after that? Where do you go? And also, we perhaps go back to 2008, won the Champions League in Moscow against Chelsea. Some great players playing in that team, such as Cristiano Ronaldo. How did that culmination come about? How did they get to that particular point where they can win those trophies? Ups and downs along the way. What did they look like? How did he react to that? So if you dig back into this journey, find out about some of the matches, some of the challenges. Were players missing? Were players injured? Were players suspended? Were there any particular legs where they were 2-1, 3-1 down and they had to come back? Did they have to change formations? How did they train? How were things communicated? How did they analyse? Was there more analysis done for some games as opposed to others? Why was that? So I think the more research you do into that journey, the more answers you're going to get. And then lift it up and apply it to your life, your career, your degree. What does that look like in your industry? And if you can apply it, you'll be further on in 4 weeks' time than you are today.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, thanks very much indeed, Mike and Dave, for your time today. And it sounds like it's going to be a fascinating exploration of a lot of areas there that are very important to people who want to progress and want to get to a top level in whatever career they choose.